Let's begin with a story that's not only breaking but developing this evening. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers says it is on strike effective immediately. This is the second nationwide strike in under a year. The move in a direct response to a series of proposed changes to Canada Post.
At present, the corporation is losing $10 million every day. In short, Canada Post is effectively insolvent and it is facing an existential crisis. Canadians are rightfully attached to it and want it saved. However, repeated bailouts from the federal government are not the solution.
Ottawa says its proposed measures could save hundreds of millions of dollars. The key change would include ending home delivery and converting the remaining 4 million addresses to community mailboxes. Canada Post is on track to lose $1.5 billion this year. Ottawa is giving the Postal Service 45 days to detail how it will proceed. In New Brunswick, unionized workers already have hit the picket line. The union says it wasn't given any indication of today's announcement from the federal government. Negotiations for a new collective agreement has been ongoing for more than a year and a half. Earlier this month, the union said the government's offer of a 13% pay increase fell short of its demand for 19%. Well, last hour, we heard from the head of the Postal Union, Jim Gallant, spoke with our colleagues at Power and Politics, and Sarah is watching the many elements of this developing story, and let's start with that.
Yeah, well, so, this interview done on Power and Politics comes as pictures were coming in of picket lines starting to appear in various parts of Atlantic Canada. What do you make of that? And so host David Cochran was interviewing Jim Gallant, who is a negotiator for Cup W, which is the union representing the postal workers, and very pointedly a number of times asked him, what we're seeing happening here in Atlantic Canada, what should the rest of the country, the other provinces and territories, make of this labor action, strike action that appears to be happening here? Is it going to be specific to Atlantic Canada? Is it going to spread across the country? And for that answer, I want to play you one of the many exchanges throughout that interview, because I think it's what we would call a newsmaker. Take a listen.
But are you going back on strike? I mean, is this... It's not a wildcat because you are in a legal strike position.
People are on picket lines as we speak.
Right, but is people, not everybody. This is what I'm wondering. Are you shutting down the mail service?
I believe that's happening. I believe that will happen within the next 24 hours.
So organically or with the direction from you and the union
the unions, it will be the union's direction.
So he said that this is, you heard him say, not going to be immediate, going to be happening over the next 24 hours, that he says this is a response to what the union feels was a misguided announcement made by the federal minister. And incidentally, yesterday, there was indication from the union that there was going to be a meeting with the federal government, and that had been postponed, and they were unclear as to why. And then this announcement happened today. The union does argue against the numbers that have been put out there in terms of financial losses, saying that if they could get a contract, which they do not have, and negotiations, as we know, have been ongoing, and then plus with the increase to the price of stamps, the amount being paid for postage here, that in fact they believe that the corporation could be profitable. Very different numbers there being presented by the union versus what we're hearing from the government and Canada Post.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fascinating clip that you played from Power and Politics because, and at CBC, I don't think you were at CBC at the time, but we've been through lockouts and strikes here, and it takes time to get the sort of word to filter through from the union to the rank and file, especially right across the country. So we know that there were picket lines up in Moncton, in Dieppe, just outside sort of the center of Moncton, and we are also watching for picket lines in other parts of the country. So the union has made it clear there is going to be a strike. The mail will stop, but what exactly is happening at each one of the postal stations across the country at this hour, not entirely clear, and we're going to continue to look at that. So we heard from Cup W. What about from management?
Yes, we haven't heard from management in response to this latest development here, and as you say, picket lines that I think are starting to pop up in various cities across the country, even as I'm speaking right now. So we're still waiting to hear what Canada Post might have to say, but they did earlier in response to what the federal government said, put out a statement, and they applauded the federal government's move to end door delivery. I want to read you part of their reasons for being so supportive of this. They write that letter mail has been steadily declining for almost 2 decades, down from 5.5 billion letters in 2006, Canada's peak mail year, to 2 billion letters last year. And that erosion will continue. At the same time, Canada's population has grown by nearly 1/3, meaning there are millions more households to deliver mail to each day. So, I mean, do the math here. You've got fewer letters going to more houses, paying more carriers, but seeing less revenue coming in. I mean, they're not paying, less letters means less money coming in to the corporation. From 2018, they say, to the second quarter of 2025, the company has posted more than, posted more than $1 billion, $5 billion, I believe it is, in cumulative losses. And pardon me, I can't quite read my penmanship there. That's an important number to get right. So I will check that one. But basically, the point they're making in that statement that they put out is that loss that they are experiencing, that's going to the taxpayer. And they do say at the very end that that's not sustainable, that the taxpayer shouldn't be incurring that.
Yeah, so you've got, it's interesting. You have a government on the one hand saying Canada Post is consistently losing billions of dollars. And of course, the government ultimately answering to the public. You have the union saying, like, we are fighting for the very jobs of our members and the future of their careers. So not surprising that they would want to strike. That's the primary concern, I guess, for both sides. But they both are probably looking at public sentiment as well, and kind of what indications we have of where the public is sitting with all of this.
Yeah, well, in that interview on Power and Politics, Jim Gallant said that they are, and he sort of looked to the camera, making a plea to the public, saying that they need public support. He was putting out his numbers and his pitch for what he sees as a profitable Canada Post, but saying that they do need public support to this. I mean, we're better to get that initial canvassing of reaction than in Moncton, where, as I say, that's where we've seen the early signs of pickets going up. So we do have some comments made by individuals on the streets. Our cameras caught up with them, just talking about the kind of delivery that they currently receive and their concerns, if they have any, as to what it will mean if that door delivery goes away.
If I have the choice, I would prefer that come and bring my mail at home. I live in Edmundston, and they bring my mail to my house.
I think it will make things more complicated. Mail should be mail. You have your box in your house, done.
We hardly get any mail now anyway, because pretty much you get everything by email. So very seldom do you get mail, but I mean, I would be fine with it for us, but I worry about the people that aren't capable.
I do want to point out, for those with mobility issues, including seniors who might require door delivery because they can't make it to that community box that's potentially going to be set up. Currently, if they don't have door delivery, they can make an application to receive door delivery. And what we understand from the federal government is that would continue to be the case. So it isn't, so those who are requiring it can still apply and have that done. But that, of course, is when there is not a job action happening. And what we understand is, like I say, as we're talking right now, that across the country, word is trickling out, that's starting to happen. The mail is, if it's slowing down, if not stopping. And so, those who are right now requiring packages or they're waiting for things to be arriving in the mail, can't say with 100% certainty, but I think it seems unlikely you're getting it as fast as you maybe hoped at this point.
The last time we had a postal strike in this country, I heard so many people say, the mail doesn't matter anymore, that we're doing things by, parcel services, private parcel services, by email and, that sort of, sending documents on the internet. And then we did an addition of cross-country checkup, and we heard so many callers talk about things like having their passports or visas stuck in the mail, medical records stuck in the mail. Certainly for a portion of people, the mail is not only important, it can be critical. And so this is a story that is unfolding right now across the country. We are live for the next 2 hours. And so I'd say for those of you who are watching, maybe you're a postal worker, maybe you're a business owner, maybe you're somebody who's waiting for your passport because you have a trip coming up in a few weeks' time, please email us. We're very interested in hearing from you and telling your perspective on this story as we continue to track this. How are you affected by this sudden postal strike? Email askhano@cbc.ca. All right, let's get some more analysis of the situation you're in. Sundeep Gokhale is a labor lawyer and a partner at Sherrard Coos LLP. Now, I understand that in talking about this, you've described this strike as a knee-jerk reaction. Describe that for us.
Sure. Cup W is calling this a strike, and legally speaking, it is. But let's call it what this really is. This is an outright protest against the government's decision or announcement earlier today to make sweeping changes across the industry, which will inevitably impact the union and the members it represents.
And so, as you point out, but let's be clear on this, they are legally in a position to strike.
Yes, they are. They're absolutely in a legal position to strike. I think we're just seeing this as a knee-jerk response, again, to the announcement that was made earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting term, right? So just imagine how that's going to land with postal workers who hear it. They're fuming. They were taken by surprise by the government today. They're worried about the future of Canada Post and the future of their own jobs. What if they were to say to you, that's kind of a harsh characterization of what they're doing?
Well, I mean, look, but for the announcement today, I don't think Cup W would be in a position in which it's ultimately striking today. And Cup W's response is probably the only position they can take right now. They do represent their members. They do have to fight the fight. And they are livid with the announcement that the government made, rightly or wrongly in terms of the assessment of what the government did. But the response from the union, they're using their legal means to get as much attention and to create as much noise as possible in the hopes of trying to represent their members to the fullest.
From your perspective as an expert in labor law, where do you think this might go next?
Well, I mean, all eyes will turn back to the government. We know that they have not been shy about using their discretion under Section 107 of the Canada Labour Code. And, this could be a situation where, again, we now see the minister potentially getting involved and forcing the parties to binding arbitration. That's always an option for this government. And I think that's one that's probably being discussed at the table right now.
And how important, and again, you live in the world of law, but you also know how labor disputes develop. How important do you think public sentiment, public support is for the two parties here? And by that, I don't even mean Canada Post, but the government, which ultimately kind of sets the parameters for Canada Post, and Cup W.
Well, I think this is the government making a decision on behalf of Canadians. They see the numbers, and they've been very vocal about the numbers in terms of the financial losses of Canada Post as currently constructed. So change has to happen, and I ultimately think the government just was of the belief that change wasn't going to happen through the collective bargaining process. We did see William Kaplan issue a report earlier this year that called for sweeping changes, and ultimately the union didn't want to hear that in terms of what they wanted to try and achieve through collective bargaining. And so here we are now in terms of the government intervening and kind of forcing these changes over the next 10 years.
These two sides seem so far apart. We knew that was the case before, legislated back to work. But again, these sort of seems like almost irresolvable problems with a Canada Post that loses so much money and these workers obviously who want to protect their jobs. And now you have this flashpoint. And probably a lot of anger on the part of the union, at least, if not its rank and file members. Do you think there's a way to cool this down, or do you think we're looking at what may be a long strike unless the government takes action?
Well, it's a great question. I think right now, but for the government getting involved, the strike's going to continue. I can't see Cup W, that they're not a trade union that historically backs down from a position unless they're legally required to do so. So I don't expect that we're going to see any cooling off. I think they're going to go all in while they can be in a legal strike position right now. And we're going to start to see that over the next 24 hours in terms of an outright strike across the country.
Sundeep Gokhale is a labor lawyer and partner at Sherrard Coos LLP. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.